everyone, welcome to episode 1 of Still Here, my marathon comeback. In this series, I'm taking you along on my journey as I race my first postpartum marathon and first marathon in 3 years. It has been a while. If you're new here, please make sure that you hit subscribe for future videos, and if you have stuck around since the last video I posted 18 months ago, I appreciate you being here. Just to recap the last 3 years and what I've been up to. In 2019, I was training for a sub 3 hour marathon at CIM. I ended up running a 3:01:24, so didn't hit my goal. Signed up for a 50K. We had a pandemic. The world shut down. We got pregnant. I had a baby, and he is now 21 months old, and I'm finally feeling ready to train for a marathon. So it has been a very long process. In this first episode, I definitely want to go over postpartum recovery because I think my experience is more the norm that's not talked about often enough versus what we probably see on social media, which is the quick return of the postpartum runner who trains for a marathon at 4, 6, 8 months postpartum, has a really big PR or something like that. And while I certainly think that postpartum people come back stronger and get stronger and can get faster, it has been a much longer process for me, and I certainly think this is more of the norm. So if you are newly pregnant or considering getting pregnant, this portion of the video is definitely for you. Then I want to share the marathon that I've decided to run and my goals for that marathon, and then talk a little bit about training leading up to this point and where I'm at in the training block, as well as a few things that I'm doing differently this cycle. This series is not just for the postpartum runner. This series is for anybody who has been injured or had a setback that they have had to crawl their way back to where they were or where they want to be. Or it's for anybody who is just looking to be inspired by the average human chasing their goals. Let's jump into postpartum recovery. As somebody who had trained consistently for 10 to 12 years prior to getting pregnant, ran 40 to 60 miles a week, depending on what I was training for, I certainly thought I would run through my pregnancy. I would have a very easy return to running after childbirth. That was certainly not the case. Running while I was pregnant was extremely challenging. So I did not run a lot. I ended up cross-training and doing more strength work. I had to stop running at 30 weeks. I then had a more complicated delivery because I had preeclampsia. Went to pelvic floor PT and got cleared to run at about 11 weeks postpartum and started on a run walk program. I ran for about 5 weeks and realized that I was certainly not strong enough to be running. Headed back to pelvic floor PT and was not cleared to run again until I was 8 months postpartum. So at that point I hadn't been running for about 10 months aside from the 5 weeks sprinkled in there, and running was so challenging. I started with a run walk, worked my way up to a continuous run. It was a very stark difference from what I had been doing prior to getting pregnant. Having coached new runners, having coached postpartum people prior to this, I certainly knew like the recovery would be long and was in it for the long haul. During this time as well, aside from losing this huge piece of me, which was the runner, the athlete, I also had this new role to step into as a mom and a new parent. I struggled immensely with postpartum anxiety. Having a baby in a pandemic did not help the anxiety piece of things, but once I was able to run and be away from the baby to cross train or anything like that, I just was filled with anxiety. That I also was fearful that I'd be missing things, and that was hard to try to work on finding myself again, but also feel some guilt about it and also feel like you're missing out on things. I was so grateful for my coach during this time who really encouraged me to take things slowly, and I was very open to not rushing any part of the process and enjoying my baby as much as I could, knowing that I wouldn't get this time back. So after building my mileage for about 5 months consistently, I ended up running a half marathon. Hadn't done any speed work leading into it and was so satisfied with the results. I was 12 months postpartum and I ran a 1:38 at Surf City. And negative split, I felt strong throughout the race, had no expectations, so it was just a really great experience for me.
Hi, Quentin! You did it. 1:38:24. 1 year postpartum. Look.
And after that, I felt really ready to jump into speed. Fortunately, I also got injured shortly after, which highlighted for me that There are just so many weaknesses in your body postpartum that are hard to navigate. I had to focus more on strength. I had to pull back on the mileage a bit. Luckily, it did not take me out of running, so that was a really good thing. And while it felt like another step back, I knew that I just had to work through the process. Eventually, the injury, it was knee bursitis, was under control and I was able to get back to training. During this time though, about 6 months, we did not have any childcare. So I was running a business, my coaching business, taking care of Quentin, my son, and managing just all of the things. And it quickly became very overwhelming and I realized I couldn't do it all. There were days that I was so tired because my baby would wake up a couple times during the night. I couldn't get my run in and I had to adjust my schedule. So this has certainly taught me a lot about flexibility and adjusting expectations because nothing is going to be perfect. It was never before, but there were a few more things that were inside of my control. So in the last 4 months, we've gotten childcare and that has changed so much for my running, for our family, and has given me the space that I need to focus on my business, focus on my training, focus on recovery, and I finally feel like this is the position that I am ready to move forward and work hard towards a marathon. I'll also admit that the further and further I get away from the last marathon I ran, it gets a little bit scarier to think about running 20 miles. So initially, postpartum, I knew that the first time I wanted to run a marathon would be when I was ready to run a sub 3 again. And I'm not ready to run a sub 3. So while in some ways that feels disappointing, I also want to jump back into marathon training, learn what it feels like again to run longer, work through that marathon fatigue, get some more experience because I have been out of practice for a long time. We are moving forward on to the next topic, which is the race that I've decided on, which is the Mesa Marathon in February of 2023. So we're about 15 weeks out from the race, and I certainly have some goals, not just numbers goals, but also just goals for the whole process, and the biggest one being to just enjoy myself. I think during CIM training, that was the most enjoyable training cycle that I had. I felt like I really focused week to week on building, less on the outcome goal, even though I did have this big scary goal of a sub 3, and I worked more on the mental side of training, and I really do want to get back there. I think since I've become a mom, there's been a lot of running has to sit in the background, whereas running was very much my everything prior. I'm adjusting to learning to work hard for something while I'm really tired all the time. More than anything, I'm trying to recommit to myself and my goal. My second goal is certainly a time goal. I think for me, just having a number out there is helpful to work towards in workouts and things like that. So I would love to run anywhere between a 3:10 and a 3:15. I certainly don't want to limit myself. We have 15 weeks of training, so things could progress in a different direction, and I may have to adjust that time goal either forward or backwards. And so we'll see where that goes. But I think right now that feels like it would be very satisfying to me as my first marathon back, not having raced one in 3 years. On to the next topic, which is training. Over the summer, as soon as my child went to daycare, we got COVID. So I took some time off and worked my way through that recovery process, which was a lot of elevated heart rates, slowing down, really building things back very slowly, not doing any speed for about 6 weeks, and getting back into speed was very challenging. So I started speed workouts again probably 6 weeks ago. They have finally started to feel a little bit less daunting. I used to run 6 days a week. Now I only run 5 with an optional 6th day if I feel like I have the time. The biggest thing that I am doing this training cycle that is different from any past training cycle I've done is that I started working on my strength in person with a personal trainer. After CIM in 2019, I realized that strength was probably the number one thing I hadn't focused on. I was certainly incorporating it into my training. I really focused on nutrition and getting my body to an optimal place with my inside tracker work. This cycle, I really want to focus on the strength, and it's more important now because there are still certainly a lot of weaknesses in my body from carrying a baby for 9 months. And I've been doing strength at home prior to this, but was very limited with the weights that I had. So getting into a gym, being able to progress each week has been super helpful. I finished week 3 and I want to say I'm already feeling a difference on my runs. I think my paces are getting a little bit more comfortable at a faster effort. It's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to how that will just impact my running going forward. Future episodes, I am going to take you guys along on some workouts with me, some long runs. I will be racing a couple times during the training cycle. If you have any questions or comments, please be sure to drop those below. Make sure you're subscribed for future videos, and I'll see you next time.